Here we are. Sunday leftovers.
Sunday leftovers.
All right, little technology situation going on today.
Yeah.
We had a cable failure. We're running all over town looking for the right thing. We're gonna have to do this old school with the microphone.
And actually, we got the right thing, but for some weird reason, the audio interface doesn't working. No. So we are using the audio directly from the computer, and
it's fine.
It's fine.
I mean, we're not the most polished broadcasting outfit there is anyway, right?
That's for sure.
We're certainly not the most polished thing you'll see today on the interwebs. Anyway, here we are.
That's for sure. So how was your week?
It's fantastic. Great Thanksgiving. Great time with family and kids, and my sister, who is just a beam of sunlight, was in town, and I feel full and happy, and God is good.
It's nice to have family around.
Yes. So Sunday leftovers, right? The idea is to talk about what's kind of kicking around in our head from last Sunday, and last Sunday felt like a very significant day to me, and it had nothing to do with the sermon. It was my sister called it when she read the benediction at the end. She's like, well, today's moment was clearly Andrew's song. Andrew Sawchuk sang a version of a song written by a Canadian singer-songwriter that I absolutely adore. His name is Luca Fogale.
Luca Fogale.
Yeah, and the song is entitled Unfolding, and so it's been several weeks that I asked Lamar and all the band members to consider singing that song. It's one of those super deep. I just think he captures it. I think he captures everything that's sacred and of meaning. So I asked him a couple weeks ago to pull the song out of the hat, see if they could. It takes a few weeks for things like this to happen, and sort of it just aligned on Advent 1. And Advent, as we're going into the season of Advent, really is it's a rethinking of the sort of the origin of our story, the origin of our faith. It's the beginning, which is what we claim is what happened in the birth of this child that somehow gave us a new perspective on how it all went down. So I'm super fired up about this. Sometimes we come into these Tuesday conversations and we're like, what do you want to talk about? I don't know. And then other times it's like I got so many ideas. Yeah, I got so many ideas. It's like I'm trying to back a Winnebago into a one-car garage here. So be kind and patient. This is what adult ADHD looks like. But the reason, I think there were two reasons why the breakout moment on Sunday was Andrew's singing of that song. In part because of Andrew's story. Now, it's his story to tell. If you don't know Andrew Sawchuk, you must cut through the crowd and get to know him. He's got an amazing story. And all I can tell you is what we saw on Sunday. And this is all of the story that I think I feel comfortable telling because it's his story. But what we saw was an unfolding of him, which was the lyric of the song, which then became, or is becoming, or has become, or in a mysterious way, is kind of the theme of Advent for me, right? So let me see if I can hit those three things. Churches are places where lots of people are wounded, and it takes a really long time, if ever, it takes a really long time for people to come back and fully unfold in a place that feels safe.
Yeah, they're right.
So to fill in the context of that story, y'all go hang out with Andrew Sawchuk. We watched him unfold musically. We watched him unfold. I could show you the minute. I could show you the minute of the broadcast because he goes to that vocal place where he's just going to trust what's going on. Lamar starts to get giddy and he's like bouncing on his guitar and my hat's flying off on the front row. It was that moment, but it was his unfolding. But here's why I think that song and the concept of unfolding encapsulates the season. The chorus goes, I'm not broken, I'm not breaking, I'm not breaking, I'm not broken, I'm unfolding. Whether you caught it or not, there was a big theological move made on Sunday. Huge. Now, we like to overstate things as preachers. If it wasn't for preachers overstating things, there wouldn't be a lot to talk about. But here's my thing. Here's my thing.
In this case, I think it's true.
I think it's true. Here's the deal. Here's the theological move. Here it is. The world isn't moving from perfect and pristine to chaotic and broken. The world is unfolding. It's moving from adolescent to adulthood. Now, this reverses everything if you grew up in conservative spaces, which were probably informed by Reformed theology, perhaps that's not the case for you, but for most of us, that's the case. If you grew up in Reformed-influenced theological spaces, so think all the Baptist versions, most all of the other evangelical versions of church,
Right.
then what you're most accustomed to is the idea that things used to be perfect until we broke them, and then we broke them so bad
We're
that God
living in
had
a
to fix it.
fallen creation.
Yes.
And we are
That's
fallen
right.
human beings.
That's right. And God hated us so much for the choice we made in the garden that he had to murder his own son in order to figure out how to love us again. I'm making a bit of a cartoon of it, but that's essentially the gospel we
That's
grew up on.
pretty much
Yeah.
accurate.
Right. I was talking with my sister
It's like
just yesterday.
I need to satisfy my hunger.
Right.
And okay, I can kill you because you're just a human.
Yeah.
So I will kill my son.
Right. I'll
Which
kill my
is-
son instead.
Yeah.
Which, how did that ever? What a weird and angry and maniacal view of God that ever was. I don't know how people crave that, but anyway, that aside, let me see if I can figure out what I'm trying to say here. We were taught that the world went from Eden, right, or perfection or whatever, and took a downward turn because of our evil, and that God had to somehow intervene indirectly through Jesus and turn it around, and that somehow everything is going down. My sister brought it up yesterday. We were walking the lakefront. She said, well, isn't that the second law of thermodynamics?
Yeah, the entropy.
Entropy. Everything goes everything goes down towards disorganization. And here's what I told her. She's my older sister, but I still take her to school once in a while. For a particular...
And it's super satisfying.
And she's also
it's
not
super
listening right now.
satisfying.
She's also not listening. It would be so much more fun if she was listening right now, because I could be like... Anyway. See if I can make this case. For an organism, there is a trajectory of breakdown, of decay, of falling apart, right? For an organism. But here's the thing that I think is true. For an organization of organisms, or the cosmos, or for the created order, or you could say for humanity, in the moment, and this was my point about hope on Sunday, in the moment it feels like things are coming apart, things are falling apart. But in the end, if we back out and see time from a fuller picture, all things are moving towards adulthood. All things are moving towards a higher level of organization. Ilia Delio wrote a book called The Unbearable Wholeness of Being. I've mentioned it before. I tried to find it on my bookshelf. I can't find it. I've loaned it to one of y'all scallywags, and y'all have not brought it back to me. No, that's terrible. It's out there somewhere. But Ilia Delio writes, she's the first that was able to help me understand. Not only are organisms learning and growing, so think things, units, people, things, not only are they growing and organizing and adapting and learning, but the organization of them too has a collective energy that's also doing that same thing. So when my sister says, but hang on, but things go from this to that, like hot to cold or hot to room temperature, for that moment perhaps things feel like they're going down, but if you blow it out to the bigger picture, that energy is not gone. That energy remains. All energy that ever was remains. Okay. So what I'm suggesting, and if you can catch this, then you're digging deep. What I'm suggesting this Advent, and what I've been suggesting for a while, is that we don't desperately need God to come and change the trajectory of things that we broke. What we are doing is we are unfolding, as is God, as is the created order. And so when you take a young man like Ander in his story, and you put the words through his mouth of, why is it black?
It's black just because.
Is it just
Okay, now we're back.
Alan and Linda? Can you guys still
Sorry,
hear us?
it was the internet.
We're talking to Alan and Linda today. Can you guys still hear us? Give us a thumbs up there in the comments.
Yeah, give us a thumb
Yeah,
up.
okay.
Sometime.
I'm waiting for the thumbs up. Also, I've totally lost.
We're
my train
waiting
of thought.
for you.
I have no idea what we're going to say. But I think what I'm suggesting, and it is a different theological way of understanding the world is becoming right on schedule. It is unfolding. She says yes.
Yeah.
We're good. It is unfolding right on schedule. It is maturing exactly as designed. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
So what this means is we don't exist in a world that is somehow we don't exist in a world that God can't penetrate from within and become part of because of sin or some decision or somebody ate an apple or whatever. All these metaphors. We exist in a world that every day is moving in the direction of Ted Peters wrote about in the 80s, in the direction of God, is what I would say. I think God is the future of the world. I think the world is the unfolding of God. So this is, okay, now we're getting dangerous. I saw the smile on your face because you're thinking, it feels like heresy now.
It sounds like the Chardin, Pierre de Chardin, and
Chardin,
the
yes.
Omega Point.
Yes. That stuff is compelling.
Oh, Omega!
Okay, all right. So this Advent, instead of looking at a dark and sinful and evil and wicked world, I want to look at the deeper truth about the birth of God among us, which is that it's always been capable of tabernacling, which is a terrible word, but we're Texas, we can do what we want. The world has always been more than capable of holding all things divine. That little collection of people and sheep and cows, maybe donkeys and teenagers in this little cutout spot in a stone wall in Bethlehem many, many years ago, that little place was not humble in any way. In fact, what I would suggest, and this is largely, guys, because I've been reading, who is now one of my favorite authors. I don't know if you can see it. This is the book called Braiding Sweetgrass by Kimmerer, Robin Wall Kimmerer. Some of you are reading it. I know Liz is reading it. Some of you have picked up on that thing. The world is a holy, sacred place. I don't know how we were ever so convinced that the world disgusts God and it is antithetical to spirit.
I think it's a very Platonic.
Thank you,
deal.
Plato.
We inherit all of that from Plato, and sometimes we complain about this ancient points of view of the world, but we need to acknowledge that those points of views were useful at the time. The bad thing is when we are attached to those points of views until today, thinking that there's no other way to approach reality or see God or anything. So that was fine for that day.
Yes.
It's not good enough for now. For example, this transactional thing about the father must kill his son in order to get the right to forgive us, pretty good for medieval age.
Yeah.
Not for today.
No, exactly.
But for some reason, the dogma is communicating that still today. And we need to have the permission, and we have the permission to rethink everything.
I'm with you. So I think there's two mistakes that we could make. One would be to stick to those old metaphors and say this is the only kind of truth that's truth, and so everything else is wrong.
Right.
That's one mistake. The other mistake would be to look back with something less than grace for those who spoke the deepest truth of their generation, which is what you're suggesting. We have to be understanding. The ancient man or woman did not understand the world the way we do, and so therefore could not have seen what we're able to see. But what a tragedy it would be if we think that our role as people of faith is simply to memorize what we're told and then never change it. How does that make sense? We don't send rockets into deep, deep, deep space based on the understanding of the cosmos of ancient men.
No.
We don't. Science and all of these different areas, we feel the freedom to explore what we can know now. But for whatever reason, when it comes to faith, we ooh, don't touch that. And the reality is, the great delight of my life, and maybe yours as well, is that we get to be part of a community that feels none of those restraints.
Right.
We are not constrained or held back from reconsidering Advent again. So here we are again, right? What happened in that place? How do we make sense of it? So I think the most profound thing that can be said, thank you Luca Fogale, obviously thank you Andrew Sawchuk, is that it's all unfolding. It's unfolding. In the opening couple lines of that song, the ones that gripped me the first time I heard it months ago, it says, the sleight of hand is slowing. Luca's talking about the disintegration of faith. Sleight of hand is when you're able to pull off a magic trick because you can move your hands quick enough and no one notices.
Okay.
What do you do when it slows down? What do you do when all the old magic starts to seem dated? When all the old things what do you do when all the old tenets of our faith, the metaphors of our faith that we held them as fact, not metaphor, what do you do when they start to feel dusty? You got a couple choices. You can go la 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 and act like you still believe it, Or you can lean in and say, I'm in a place right now where this doesn't feel like it used to feel.
Right.
And then you can push even deeper. And I think this is where discipleship begins to really take off. It has to do with releasing metaphors and going into space and saying, what is the most faithful thing to say now about the birth of a child to a teenage couple on the fringes of empire in a world so distant from ours? What's the most faithful thing that we can say about that life? And what I said on Sunday was that hope is built into us. It's not built into our circumstances. It's built into us. And the moment we lose track of hope, back out, reacquaint yourself with time. Kimmerer is going to say, if you're going to get in touch with time, you're going to have to get familiar with the stones and the trees and the rocks and the soil. You're going to have to get familiar with the natural world, but get yourself back into time and realize hope is built in. We are moving in the direction of God. I'm just going to go as far as saying that's never not been true, and that's never going to change. So take a deep breath and lean in, and let's consider again what it might mean that God put on flesh, but not just once. How many kids do you have? He's done it 3 times at your little ranchito. He's done it 5 times at mine. You tell me if people don't know intuitively, when you gather bedside for the birth of a child, is that not a divine moment? I don't care what the circumstances are. That is a holy sacred moment. That's one of what Barbara Brown Taylor would call, that's one of those thin places. What's the other word she uses? I've heard Sam use it too. It's one of those visceral places where it's a liminal space. That's what the word she uses. It's a scientific word. It's one of those liminal spaces where you can literally see divinity. All those years when I told myself that here, these children are born in original sin and they're going to hell unless y'all, did that ever feel true to anyone?
I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe your baby had colic, and so maybe that does feel true to you. But anyway, big ideas coming at us.
Huge ideas. I think sometimes, I don't know. I feel like sometimes people could underestimate these ideas. Maybe saying, maybe this is too hard to understand.
Right.
So if you feel that way, you're not alone. But you're in a place that you can make questions, and you will have some answers, maybe not answers, but some responses to those questions, and we can still talk about
faith.
Here's
one. Sweet Linda and Ed out from Connecticut says, don't move too quickly. I'm reading. She asks a very intuitive question. What I'm confused about, she says, is are we redefining who Jesus is? And so, Linda, I would say to that question, of course we are, as everyone always has.
And she continues.
Still the Trinity, still the Son. Yes, that's true for me, but a bit maybe. See, this is what happens when you read it out of time. Okay, so what she's doing is she's identifying the emergency brake.
Right.
That's supposed to stop us from breaking things by asking too big of questions. But here's my question for you, Linda, and for all of us. Has every generation not redefined who Jesus was for them? How does Jesus go from king to warrior to mystic to gentle welcomer of children? How does every generation find the one they need in the moment they need? Well, because this is how metaphor works. This is how ancient people work. If you live a noble life, your life becomes an idea, and it stays bouncing around within the created world in the hearts and minds of people who can pull from your memory as needed. Does that mean we're doing something inappropriate with the memory of Jesus? I would say absolutely not. Absolutely not. What we're acknowledging is what we all know to be true, which is that ancient men saw the world a certain way. The friends of Jesus saw him a certain way. Listen, they weren't even in unison in how they saw him.
No.
So we got to be kind to ourselves. The friends of Jesus had very different views. 3 of them thought, this is going to be a war. We're ready to fight the war. And when it wasn't a war, they're like, yeah, I'm out. One of them thought, this is violence. We got to start killing people who don't accept this. No, that's not it either. One of them just simply walked away, Judas, and just says, this makes no sense to me at all. There was no consensus, and there has never been a consensus around who Jesus was. There has never been. I think the profound reality is that life happens when we engage that question. So here's how I would say it. What's the most faithful way to understand and live in the example of God taking on flesh in the baby of Mary? That's the question right there.
I would like to suggest something maybe useful for more than just one person. Probably you can go to your local library
Yeah.
and try to find a book from that talks about the church history. And when you go to the church history, you realize that all the things that we inherit
Yeah.
in a very dogmatic way, in a very like this is a spiritual, this is the Bible, this is just the way to
Yeah.
to read it, become from a totally different place. You said at the beginning the disciples, they didn't have a like a
Consensus, yeah.
consensus.
Yeah.
That's the word. But eventually, when the church became one with the empire, it was so difficult to manage an empire with different ideas about Jesus. Constantine made the master movement of with the Christianity in order to have something like it was so easier to control population that believes in one God than a population that believes in so many gods.
Right.
So
Yeah.
if I'm not agree with you and I'm of the authority at the concilio, how do you say concilio?
Council.
At the council, you will be exiled. And that was the way
Or even
that
worse.
that
Even
the
worse.
doctrines
If you don't
prevailed.
agree with me, then I refuse to give you the host for the Eucharist. So
Yeah.
therefore, I control your family and I control the empire by denying you access to the way God is in the world, to the Eucharist.
Right.
Because parallel to that time of empire was the theology that said Christ is in the world, literally in the host and in
Right.
the cup. And so yes, it becomes easy to say we are going to have one version of Jesus. It's the church-sanctioned version of this truth, and everything else is out, and you're excommunicated.
Yeah.
That was a power move. That was not a theological move.
Yeah, that was a power
It
move.
was a power move. And what did it give us? It gave us century after century after century of war and discord and broken things. And what did we misplace? We misplaced the message of the gospel. What I'm suggesting is that the message of the gospel is an invitation to engage the fact that God came inside the material world in the form of a baby, the way God has done this endlessly over time. The way to get back to the gospel is to say what can be true about a God who would make a move like this, and what then must be true about us. So how do we end up at the conclusion that says that we're evil, we're wicked, we're distant, we can't encounter God? When God made the first move, we're denying that very theological tenet by accepting an incarnation at all. What I'm suggesting is what you say. For a long time, the revelation moved along the lines of the world is broken and God can redeem it. The good news was that God made an effort to do it. What I'm suggesting now is as we look forward into the future, it's not original sin, bro. It's original goodness. It's original goodness. That's also always been in our text. So it's not as if we're breaking anything or reading it different. We're not new here. And the truth is as soon as Constantine gathers the bishops in council and closes the door, and he has the revelation that, by this you'll conquer, and it was essentially a sword and a cross. As soon as this happens, what also happens in history? The Desert Fathers go out into these unknown places, and they begin to conceive of a completely different Jesus, a completely different gospel, and it germinates for a while, and then it has its moment where it speaks back to empire, and it literally corrects the evil of Christendom and calls it back to the gospel. We're not doing anything different than anyone ever has.
No.
Jesus is all of that and all of the things that need to be true, but we have to make that next step. He's not just a historical figure. When we talk about Jesus, what we are saying is this is what we affirm to be true about God as manifested in the life of this person. How do we extrapolate that for the rest?
Right.
We say, you did amazing things, Jesus. We're going to write about him. Jesus says, you're going to do far more amazing things than I. We are on a trajectory towards higher consciousness and higher integration, deeper truth. We are maturing. And I just see, and I'm aware that for some of us, it's going to be really hard to accept.
Yeah, right.
Maybe you need to go back to a church that teaches you how lost and broken everything is all the time. Maybe that's the gospel you need. I think we are moving in the direction of wisdom, integration. I think the organisms themselves, as organized in an organization of organisms, are moving to a higher level. I think we see things differently now, and I think that's okay. You hear from us all the time about this. We're not breaking things or asking unaskable questions. We are simply naming the permission that you guys have always had, that we've always had, to grapple with the reality of God in the world. Never stop grappling. Never stop grappling. That's a weird word, grapple. How do you say
What?
grapple in Spanish? Grapple. Never stop.
Proper.
Yeah, grapple. Never stop trying to understand. I don't know. My English feels a little weird today, but all right, we pulled it off. We pulled it
Yeah.
off, even technologically challenged, and we went long.
Yeah.
Love you guys, Linda, Alan, all y'all. We'll see you soon.
See ya.
Epic 2 coming at us.